Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Gurubhyo Namaha. As I stated earlier, we're going to be discussing one of the most important sages in history, Narada Muni. If an individual has been on the path of Sanatana Dharma for some time, they have heard his name. For people who are not on the path of Sanatana Dharma, they've heard the mispronunciation of his name, probably Narada Music. Does anyone know that music company? They put out New Age music. It's an enormous company. It's maybe one of the biggest New Age music companies. And of course, they mispronounce his name. They call it Narada. It's not Narada, it's Narada. The first A is long, Narada. And the reason why I'm going to be speaking about him is because, again, his significance, both historically but also for us today, is something that is known by very few people. For individuals who are conversant with Vedic literature, we know that he appears all the time. We know that he is a very central figure. And as I was saying earlier, it's very rare that you have one figure who appears again and again and again, all throughout the scriptures. From the Vedas themselves, to the Mahabharata, to the Ramayana, to so many of the Puranas, especially the Bhagavata Purana. You'll see this person appear and do something, appear and do something, appear and teach, appear with a mission, appear, at crucial times in history. There is no sage that I'm aware of who is found that often, who is so omnipresent all throughout the scriptures. Why is this the case? Well, Narada is a very important figure for several reasons. His story is something that's very important. His teachings are extremely important, especially what his teachings have for us today. Also, his nature is something that's very important. He is someone who is officially an Avesha avatar. What that means specifically is that he is a human being. He is a Jivatman, an Atman, just like all the rest of us. He is not God, but rather he is a finite being like the rest of us. However, he is someone who is directly empowered by God. This is why he engages in so many missions on behalf of God. This is why he'll appear in a story. There'll be something happening in the Mahabharata, and suddenly at the most important time, out of nowhere, Narada will appear walking into the hall of a great king and change history with something that he says. The reason why we see this is, again, because he is a being who is specifically empowered by God, which is what makes him an Avesha avatar. Someone who is a limited, finite Atman, but who is so empowered by God that when that being is present, really, for all intents and purposes, God is present. And you treat that person as if they are God because they are empowered by God. You see. So this is the significance of the nature of Narada. Now I want to talk just a little bit about the history and some of the attributes of Narada. We know of 3 specific incarnations of this being known as Narada Muni. In the first of these, and I won't go very deeply into all of them because they all involve very long stories. But in the first incarnation of Narada, he is a Gandharva. He is one of the gods. And again, to make a long story extremely short, because this part is not quite as important, he is blessed, he is cursed by someone to take birth upon the earth as a human being. For a person who is a god, which is what he was as a Gandharva, which is one of the layers of gods in the hierarchy of devas. To have to take birth as a human being would be kind of akin to telling a human being, in your next life you're going to take birth as a pig. Not a very dignified birth for a god to be born as a human. So on the one hand, it was kind of a curse, but on the other hand, in actuality, it was a blessing. The reason why is because he was going to be born in a very special situation. And now we go to Narada's second birth. In his second birth, he is born not only on earth, not only as a lowly human, a manushya, but he is born the son of a maidservant. A maid, essentially, someone who was a maid. So again, not seemingly a very high stature in life. In ordinary society, a maid is not considered to be, a very high-class individual. If you're born the son of a maid, you're not considered someone who has been born with a lot of privileges in life, etc. And yet, despite this fact, this was the greatest of all blessings. The reason why is because this maidservant very specifically had the duty of taking care of some what are called munis. Munis are self-realized beings who specifically practice Vedanta, the school of Vedanta, which is the highest path that there is, the path of essentially understanding the culmination of all wisdom. She was a servant to several brahmanas and several munis who very specifically were there at this home for what is called Chaturmasya. Chaturmasya is a 4-month period that takes place. And during this period, if you are a wandering mendicant, if you're a sage who wanders all the time, for these 4 months, you stay still. You don't wander anywhere. You find a nice, comfortable place, and you stay there. Well, this was during the period of Chaturmasya, these 4 months. And these sages happened to be there. And again, Narada's mother was given the assignment of helping them, serving them, cooking for them, helping them with their needs, etc., which in itself was considered to be a tremendous blessing. Because these were not ordinary individuals. These were enlightened beings. And to quite literally be the servant, literally the servant of such an enlightened being, is for the wisest of individuals the greatest thing that we can aspire for. The greatest thing. When I was with my guru, we would all aspire to be able to serve him in some small way. Literally, when I say serve him, I don't mean go on some grand mission somewhere and teach. No, I mean, if we could give us some of his clothing, please, so we could wash them. Give us something. He has a beautiful temple. Can I clean the temple today? Please? Can I clean my Gurudev's temple? To serve an enlightened being is something that is the greatest of privileges. So this is what this woman had the privilege of doing. Well, her son, of course, being with her, also had this privilege. And in these 4 months, he had the ability to be with these sages, to be very close to them, to bring them their food, to wash their clothing, to just help them with whatever material needs that they had. But more than this, he had the ability for 4 months to associate with them. He had the ability, when they spoke amongst themselves about all of these higher subject matters of Vedanta and philosophy and metaphysics and the meaning of life, he had the ability to sit there and just quietly listen to them, listen to all these wonderful conversations and to learn and to absorb. He had the ability during these 4 months to observe these people, watch these people, see how they acted, see the humility that they had, see how they treated each other with such great love, with such great respect, see how they treated other beings, see what ethical beings they were, etc. He had the ability, through their association, just by watching, to understand what it meant to live a true life. Arya, the life of an Arya, the life of a noble being. And finally, interestingly, Narada Muni himself talks about this in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and in a short time I'm going to read some of the things that he talks about when he talks about his own life and during this period of his life. At one point, when they were in the midst of eating, something overcame him, and he realized, I need to have prasada. I need to have the grace of God and the grace of these enlightened beings. So he asked them, "O great sirs, may I have a morsel of the food that you're eating so that I can taste it?" And this was just once. And they said, "Absolutely." And they gave him a little bit in his hand and he ate it. And Narada himself explains that that is what changed his life. From then on, his entire temperament changed. From then on, he began to lose his interest in material things. And Soon after that, he himself began to live the life of a mendicant, the life of a sage. He eventually left his own household. He left everything that he knew. He began to wander the forests. He began to eat just the simplest of foods, just a little bit of fruit, just whatever he could find. And food was plentiful back then. That's why the rishis always went to the forest. Things were very different back then. Back then, we had a civilization that worked. Because we had a civilization that worked, nature flourished. And on every tree, there were wonderful fruits that were just hanging, dangling there. If you wanted to not starve, you went into the forest because there was food all around you. But the important point is, he led this wonderful life of just meditating and depending upon God and just practicing yoga, practicing everything such that he could become a self-realized being himself, just like these sages who he had served for 4 months. Well, after some time, in meditation, Lord Vishnu appeared to him. And of course, you can imagine, for God to appear to a living being is something that is incomparable. It's something that is unimaginable. It's described whenever this happens, that God's beauty, that the light, the love that radiates from God, that is so tangible, that is so real, that you almost literally can see it, you almost literally can taste it, is so powerful that once you have that experience, you're never the same. And this is what happened to Narada. Except when this occurred, God specifically told him that I'm only going to appear to you for a short period of time, and you won't see me again for the rest of this lifetime. But the reason why I am appearing to you now is so that you'll have this memory, and so that you will keep your mind and your eyes upon the goal of knowing me again. And then he disappeared. Well, that is indeed what Narada did. This experience also completely transformed him. He lost all material desire after this, after seeing God, as you can imagine. Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? But after having this divine darshana, this divine vision of God, all material desire just literally melted away. At the end of that lifetime, he achieved liberation. In his next lifetime, the third lifetime, then he was Narada. It's in his third lifetime that he was given this name, Narada. And very specifically, he is the son of Lord Brahma. And just to remind people, in Sanatana Dharma, it is explained, it is understood that God does not directly create the universe. God is the karana karanam. God is the ultimate cause of all causes. God is the creator. But as far as the actual physical activity of creating the universe, God doesn't do that himself. Rather, he empowers another being, Brahma. Brahma is what in Platonic terms, in Western philosophy, is called the demiurge. He is a secondary being, and it is through that being that God physically creates the universe. One could say, to use a Brooklynism, God didn't want to get his hands dirty. So this is why God creates through someone. Well, this Brahma was the father of Narada, Narada Muni. And when Narada was born in this last lifetime, of course, he was born as a perfect sage. And he was born very specifically as an Avesha avatar, as an individual who was a personal attendant, a personal servant, a personal messenger of God himself, of the divine. And it's for this reason that, again, we find that Narada, whenever there is a time in history that's of great importance, in one way or another, seen or unseen, dramatic or not dramatic, he appears. He appears in one way or another to either teach somebody something or to steer history from one direction into another direction that it's meant to go in. There are many, many sorts of things that he does all throughout the scriptures. And this is the reason why. Narada. Narada has been here for billions of years. Quite literally, that's with a B. Billions of years. Again, it's understood that Narada, being the son of Brahma, Brahma was the creator of the universe, The universe is billions of years old. So he's been here for quite some time. He will be here for quite some time. Narada has the ability not only of having a very long life, but also of being able to traverse the lengths and breadths of all the three worlds and beyond the three worlds. The three worlds being the hellish planets, the Middle Earth, this earthly plane, and of course the heavenly plane of the gods. He has the ability to travel anywhere. He has the ability also to go beyond even the material manifestation altogether and to be at the very feet of God in the spiritual realm if he so desires, and then, if he desires, to come back. So this is Narada. When we speak about Narada, there is no sage like him. You can think of any great Vedantist, you can think of any great Acharya, you can think of any great yogi, of any great Muni, of any great anybody. But there is no one who is more empowered directly by God as Narada Muni. A few more interesting attributes about Narada. He's famous for carrying a veena. Veena is a beautiful instrument, a stringed instrument. And the reason why he carries this instrument with him is because everywhere he goes, he sings. He loves to sing. Keep in mind, what was his first incarnation? He was a Gandharva. He was a strata of gods who are known for their beautiful voices. The Gandharvas are known for their beautiful voices and for music. To this day, in fact, there's what is called Gandharva music, which is very, very traditional classical Vedic music with the sitar. The Gandharvas are known for music. Well, he used to be a Gandharva, so he's a wonderful singer and wonderful with instruments. So he travels all throughout the material world, singing like Premananda was doing a little while ago, singing beautiful bhajans, praising the divine, praising specifically Narayana, Hari, Bhagavan Shri Krishna. And it is said that if you can hear the bhajans specifically of Narada Muni, you will have liberation. So aspire to hear such beautiful glorification of God. So this is one thing that he does. He's also an author. He's also a best-selling author. In fact, he's written several books. Again, I mentioned before, probably his most famous is the Narada Bhakti Sutras. The sutra literature are a genre of literature that focus on different schools of philosophy. Thus, we have the Brahma Sutras, Yoga Sutras, Nyaya Sutras, but we also have the Narada Bhakti Sutras that focus very specifically on the science of bhakti yoga, of the yoga of devotion. Well, this is one book written by Narada. There's also Naradiya Purana. There's an entire Purana, much of which was written by Narada, the rest of which is about Narada. There is a Narada Pancharatra, which is a book of ritual, things like that. There is a Narada Dharma Shastra as well. There is a book written by Narada on Dharma. It's called the Narada Dharma Shastra, where he talks about various laws and rules of Dharma. So this is who Narada is. He's someone who, on the one hand, is a bhakta, is someone who is a devotee of Narayana, but on the other hand, who is also a thinker, who's also a philosopher, who's also an intellectual, who is also a teacher. And it's interesting, it's always frustrating to me whenever Narada is portrayed, especially today, in the last few decades, in Hindi movies. You know, they tend to portray him only as the bhakta. They tend to portray him just kind of singing, you know, and doing bhajans to Krishna. But they don't stress the fact that he's also a teacher. He's also a tremendous teacher. Not only has he written many important, very important books, he's also taught many important people. Many people. He actually has unlimited disciples all throughout the universe. Again, this is something else that's unique about him. Many gurus today can claim that they have disciples all over the world. Not many gurus can claim that they have disciples on thousands of planets scattered throughout the universe. He can. He can, because he does. So Narada is indeed a very unique figure. He's someone who incorporates in himself the best of both these worlds, of devotion, but also Vedanta, also intellectualism, philosophy. It's interesting. Vyasadeva, and for individuals who may not remember who Vyasa is, Vyasadeva. Vyasa himself is one of the most important rishis, one of the most important sages. Vyasa is responsible for the compilation and the division of the Vedas. He is responsible for the Puranas. He wrote the Mahabharata. Vyasa is a very important individual. Well, who do you think Vyasa's guru is? Directly, Narada Muni. So this gives us some indication of how important Narada is, and how, again, he's not merely someone who kind of wanders around in a trance just singing bhajans. He's also a teacher as well. So, having said this, there are hundreds of stories about Narada, hundreds of them, beautiful stories, and they all have some lesson about them. I did a summary of one of these stories as a play that I wrote, I think in 1998, something like that, and I called it Ahimsa, and it was actually performed at UW-Madison in 1998. But I don't want to talk about that story. I want to tell just another story, a very brief story, but a very beautiful, very powerful story involving Narada. It involves both who he is, what he has the ability to do, but more, it reveals also something much deeper. So let me just tell this story very, very briefly. For those who know the story, I apologize, but then I don't. Because, of course, as I always tell people, repetition is everything. Repetition is very important. This is why this is called katha. These are not ordinary stories. Stories about the divine we can hear again and again and again and again. And each time we hear them, we get something new out of them. So, true story, as all these stories are. One day, Narada was traveling and he was on his way to have an audience indeed with God. He was going to see Narayana. He was going to Vaikuntha, to the spiritual realm, in order to have some sort of discussion with Narayana. What it was is of secondary importance. But as he was traveling along the banks of a river, and he came across a person. This person was a Brahmana, and he was sitting there. Oh, and he had displayed all around him all of these intricate implements for doing puja. And he was doing a very elaborate puja with very elaborate mantras that he was saying off the top of his head. And he had been doing this for days and days and days and days, saying mantras for hours each day. Well, as this person was doing this, Narada came along, and immediately the person recognized who he was, because Narada was very famous. So he immediately got up and he went up to Narada. Oh, Naradaji, it's just so wonderful to see you. I can't believe that you're actually here. May I ask, what are you doing here? Where are you going? And Narada explains to him, oh, well, I'm just on my way to see God, just to have his audience. And at that, the person was amazed. Really? Oh, my Lord, you're going to actually see God. That's something. I'm impressed. Listen, Narada, could you do me a favor? All my life, I've been doing pujas and just doing all these things, just hoping for finally having liberation. I'm tired of this life. I've had a truly hellish life, and I just want liberation. I just want to finally get out of here and have all this suffering. And when you see God, could you do me a favor? Can you ask him, when will I finally be liberated? When will I finally be liberated? And Narada says, so sure, I'll ask him for you, definitely. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I can't wait for you to come back and let me know. So Narada continues. As Narada continues with his walk, he comes upon another person who is also sitting there by the river, and he's sitting there with japa mala, and he's reciting the names of Narayana, Narayana, Narayana. And as Narada comes upon this person, again, the person sees him and jumps up, and immediately he runs to Narada, and he touches Narada's feet, and he says, Naradaji, I can't believe that you're here. I've heard so much about you. I know that you are a truly wonderful sage, and more important than anything, I know just how much devotion you have for God and how close you are to Him. It is so wonderful to see you. Please bestow your blessings upon me." And Narada says, "Oh yes, wonderful, wonderful to meet you." And the person asks him, "Naradaji, can I ask you, what are you doing? Why are you here? Where are you going? It looks like you're traveling." And he says the same thing. "Oh yes, I'm going to see God. I'm going to have his audience and discuss a few things with him." And with that, the man goes silent. And he says, "You're going to see him. You're going to see him. When you're there, can you please ask him, when can I be in his presence as well and serve him? When? Because that's all I want." Narada says, "Yes. Yes, absolutely." And he goes on his way. Well, a few seconds later, he's in the spiritual realm. And he is there before Narayana with Lakshmi sitting by his side. And he appears and he immediately offers Dandavata Pranamas. He literally lies down on the floor like a stick before the feet of God. And as he's getting up, God says to him, "Yes, I have the answers for you." Oh, you knew what I was going to ask you. Oh, wonderful. Okay. And then God says this to Narada: "However, before you give them the answers, can you tell each of these individuals something for me, please? Tell them both that when you saw me, I was taking an elephant and threading that elephant through the eye of a needle." Oh, all right, I'll tell them that. And then Narada and God have their conversation. Well, when the conversation is done, Narada leaves the spiritual realm, comes back to the earthly plane. First person who he encounters is this person who is doing all the elaborate ritual. And as soon as the person sees Narada, immediately, of course, he jumps up and he says, "Narada, Narada, did you see him? Did you see God? Did you see Narayana?" And Narada says, "Yes, yes, oh, I did." "Well, when am I going to be liberated? When am I going to be liberated?" "Oh, well, I have the answer for you. Calm down." "I have the answer for you, but before I give you the answer, are you curious to ask me any other questions about God? I mean, I was in his presence. Do you have any questions?" And the person thinks, well, sure, yeah, I guess. What was he doing?" And Narada says, "Oh, well, he was threading the eye of a needle with an elephant." "Excuse me?" "He was threading the eye of a needle with an elephant." That's not logical. That's not a possibility. What are you talking about? What? How can, no, the eye of a needle is that big. No, the circumference, no, wait. And as the man is trying to figure this out, Narada says, "Oh, and by the way," he said, "it'll be approximately 1,000 more lifetimes." And he goes off. Then he encounters the second person. Second person similarly sees Narada, gets up, and immediately runs to him, touches his feet with all humility, and says, "Naradaji, were you there? Did you see God face to face?" And Narada says, "Yes, yes, I was there. Please tell me everything. What did he look like? What was he doing? What was he wearing? What did the two of you speak about? Tell me everything." And Narada proceeded to. And then he ended with saying, "Oh, and by the way, also, he was doing something very interesting when I was there. He happened to be threading the eye of a needle with an elephant." When he said that, a smile came across the face of the man. And he said, "Yes, that is Narayana. There is nothing he cannot do. Such is the nature of God." And Narada told him, "Oh, and by the way, he also said that at the end of this very lifetime, you will see him personally." So, beautiful story. Beautiful, beautiful story. So, what is the purport? What is the purpose of the story? I think much of it is quite obvious. That it is not the quantity of what we do. Religiosity alone is not going to help us to know the divine, but bhakti, devotion. It's not how much we do, it's not how much we think we know, but rather it's, do we have that humility and that devotion? Do we have that love for the divine such that nothing else really matters? See, for this second person, it's interesting. He seemed to ask the same question as the first person, didn't he? But no, he didn't. The first person, the religious person, wanted to know, when will my suffering end and when will I be liberated? The second person wanted to know, when will I finally be with that object of my love? That's the difference. That's the difference. This is why in the initial stages of spiritual life, we seek liberation. We seek moksha, existential freedom, liberation from this world. But then, interestingly, after some advancement, it comes to the point where we no longer seek even that. Rather, we only seek to love the divine. And this is the most amazing thing. It is in that love of the divine that we are liberated. In other words, when we so love God that we no longer even care about liberation, then we're liberated. Because literally all self-involved desire has ceased. And all that there is God. Oh, am I liberated yet? Who cares? Doesn't matter. Just as long as I'm serving the divine. Just as long as I'm serving the divine. And such a bhakta, such a pure devotee of God, can have been liberated for an infinite amount of time at that point and not even notice. That's how exalted and how great and how blissful this state is of bhakti, of devotion. Beautiful story. Let me just end with this. What does he have to teach us today? Because again, it's interesting how you have this great being, this amazing individual, Narada, who you can read so much about. You can read about him in various scriptures, in the Mahabharata and the Srimad Bhagavatam, different places. But again, what is the significance of this individual for our lives today? It's his teachings more than anything. It's his teachings. A great sage teaches us in several ways. They teach us in literally their vani, their teachings, their words, but they also teach us with their life as well. So in the case of Narada, like all true sages, we learn both from what he actually says, much of which is greatly philosophical actually. We haven't covered too much of that today, but that's because we're going to do that in the future. But he also teaches us in his very life itself. What is the path to liberation? Well, we see that from his own life. The path to liberation is find those individuals who are already themselves liberated and associate with them. The example that's given again and again and again by the scriptures, by so many gurus, is that if you have a bar of iron and you want that iron to become like fire, you take it and you put it in the fire, leave it in there, and after some time it becomes like fire. Take it out of the fire and it's glowing and it's hot, and if you touch it to something just like fire, it will start to burn it. Well, in the same way, we, being like those metal rods, if we place ourselves in that fire, but a fire that doesn't hurt, on the contrary, that fire being God, that fire being the divine, that fire being the association of sages, then we too become like that. Upasana, you've heard me use this word many times. It's by proximity to the divine that we become like the divine. It is by proximity to individuals who are liberated that we become liberated. This is why with everything that we do, we try to bring ourselves close to the divine. This is why we read scriptures. This is why we associate with sages, with other people on the path. This is why we associate with God quite literally by meditating, by hearing the names of God, allowing the names of God to enter within us and purify our being. So this is the path, as we can see from Narada's own life. And this is the nature of prasada. And I'm going to end with this. Prasada, grace. Grace. It's interesting. In the story of Narada and how he became who he was, yes, he associated with these sages. Yes, he had their personal company. Yes, he learned from their own lives, watching them. How do they act? What is their behavior like? Yes, he listened to what they were talking about, the philosophy, the Vedanta, everything else. But as he himself explains, what is it that finally did it for him? Can I please have a morsel of your food? And he tasted that. Prasada, grace. See, that was both symbolic, but it was also something very real. Was it the food itself? Of course not. It was, again, that devotion, that bhakti, that he had so much devotion, not just for God, but for these sages, that he said, I know that if you will give me a little bit of your food and I taste it, that will help me spiritually. Faith, shraddha, healthy faith, healthy faith. This is the nature of prasada, so much so that this is why we have the general term prasada, meaning God's grace, but also when we offer food to God, that also is prasada. Quite literally. So this is the nature of grace. That one morsel of grace, one, again, just to be allegoric, one little grain of rice of grace can save us. So this is what Narada has to teach us. Sri Krishna Prasada, the grace of the divine, can save us more so than anything in this world.